Well, the tempo is not stopping anytime soon. So it seems like in the last 24 hours, the day that AI agents have stopped becoming a demo and very much become a hard, real, true, continuous, sustained part of a lot of people's roles. So let's jump into it. So 2 days ago, Microsoft put roughly 2,500 developers into a room in San Fran and basically told them that the era of talking to AI is essentially over. So what do we mean by that? The era of AI doing the work on its own in the background whilst you're asleep has fully started. So that's not a slogan, it has fully shipped. And so if your job involves, knowledge work or a keyboard or a computer, this changes basically how you do everything this month. So let's kind of break it down into a couple of steps. But I think the big thing to take away from this is let's recap here. The goal is to become 1% better every single day at what's going on in the world of AI. You can congratulate yourself by actually consuming this kind of knowledge or consuming from any source, but make sure that it is daily. Make sure that it's up to date and relevant, because looking at something from last month is absolutely pointless. Thinking about something theoretical and reading theory about AI, again, somewhat pointless. Like the value is in the pragmatic aspects of knowing what's going on today, being able to re-communicate that to, let's say, your team if you're employed, or if you have a company. Well, you could say both your team if you're employed or if you are an employer. Knowing how to communicate that and framing it is so vital in today's world to basically make sure that you are the go-to AI expert in your community. All right, so let's keep moving forward. So basically, the Microsoft build, as it's going to be known as, agents become infrastructure, not just kind of a random tool. So Microsoft build, their big conference over the last couple of days, ran on Tuesday and Wednesday just last week. And Satya Nadella, whose whole thesis was one sentence: Windows is no longer a platform just for humans. Agents are now first-class citizens. Hear that again. Agents are now first-class citizens. That's wild. When you think about what's coming down the track in terms of robotics, it's just phenomenal stuff. So in the operating system, the tools, all of it. So here's what it means basically in plain English, with 3 announcements that kind of specifically matter to you and to I. Number one, Microsoft IQ as the brand name. This is the context layer. The reason your AI assistant has felt I've been dumb at work is that it actually doesn't know your company, your documents, your data, your systems, your infrastructure, your raison d'etre, as we say. So Microsoft IQ basically feeds agents your workplace knowledge, your business data, live web information. So what that does is it translates into your assistant stopping being kind of like a clever stranger as such. That's a good way of thinking about AI for a lot of us. It's kind of like this random clever stranger that can give you kind of witty quips and good info, but it doesn't always have the depth. And that's, I think, a reason why a lot of people have kind of negated AI over the last 9 to 12 months. Like, oh yeah, ChatGPT, it's amazing, whatever, but it doesn't really understand our business. We're an accountancy firm, or we're like a small tech company doing data analytics or anything. Like, we're a funeral home, could be literally any kind of business, but ultimately AI is going to come into all of these things. I know it's laughable, random kind of analogy of something like a funeral home, but think about it. Think of the amount of admin going on in some sort of small business like that. Tons of admin, tons of compliance, tons of confidentiality. Think of the world of opportunity that's out there. It's absolutely crazy. If you were to think about being self-employed, for example, and going and pitching a chain of funeral homes these services, I'd be pretty sure there's not a huge amount of competition in that space, and you've got crazy first movers advantage by listening and consuming this information. But again, the most important thing is taking 5 minutes today to just try some of these tools. Let's all do that together. It's so vital. All right, let's keep moving forward. So autopilots, long-running autonomous agents. So the first one is called Scout. In the demo, it watches your inbox and your team messages. This is all the Microsoft ecosystem again, by the way. And then it flags the things that you actually need to focus on. The keyword is long running. So old AI is, you ask a question, it answers, done. Ask this clever person a question, gives you an answer, end of story. Now, the new AI is it keeps working while you're not looking. So this is kind of exciting, because in a way, this kind of ties into the concept of, oh, you know what? In the future, we're actually going to spend more time out in nature. We're going to spend more time with our families, with our kids, with our loved ones, with our friends, on our crazy adventures, on that wild night out, whatever it is you want to get after. I commend you for it, but making sure that you actually integrate and understand how to use these tools now so that you can get to that place. So keep your eyes on the vision here. There's a reason why we're doing this. There's a reason why we're trying to learn this stuff. And this is an example of Microsoft Scout. So what does this mean for you? Here's the honest thing. The valuable skill is shifting. So For 2 years, for the last 2 years, was basically learning how to prompt, writing a good instruction. That's now kind of the basics. Everyone's up to that standard. The new valuable skill is orchestration, setting up an agent, giving it the right context, giving it the guardrails, and checking in on its work. So if your current job has repetitive tasks, kind of chunky, reconciling spreadsheets, triaging emails, responding to Slack messages, WhatsApps, Telegrams, anything like that, ultimately think about how you can use an agent for it. The person who keeps doing it by hand is becoming more and more someone who's going to get pushed down the line. That's the whole game right now. The person who operates the agents is the person who is the most valuable. All right, so let's keep moving forward along a similar thread here. So your AI just became a coworker that operates while you sleep. So this is something that can land right into the hand, in your hand rather, on your phone, not in a developer's terminal. That's the big thing here as well, is like this, what I'm sharing is not for you and I to become like crazy terminal developers overnight. I'm not one. I'm presuming probably you're most likely not, but we have the chance to be able to be so far ahead of people by understanding these steps. So over the last few days, Google has started rolling out a feature called Gemini Spark to its top tier subscribers in the US. So forget a chatbot. Spark is a personal agent that runs in the background around the clock, even when your phone is locked or switched off. You give it the task once and it keeps on going. So examples of Google giving us examples Google are trying to share with us are pretty refreshingly normal. It can scan your credit card statements and flag the subscriptions that you forgot you were paying for. It can watch your kids' school's emails and turn them into a one daily summary. It can take your meeting notes and turn them into a clean document and draft a follow-up email to send. Tons of simple basic stuff, but ultimately, if you get that rolling, it'll massively help over time. So there's a second feature that's actually more useful for most people because it's cheaper to get to, and that's the daily brief. So every morning it pulls from your urgent emails, your calendar, your follow-ups into one prioritized digest. And then from there, it can tell you basically what it thinks you should focus on. So now the money part and the real story. To get people into Spark, Google cut the price of its flagship AI plan from about $250 down to just over 100, a 60% drop overnight. So really, they're trying to get us all into this. So if you haven't, I'm going to do it straight after. I'm going to dive in and continue to play around with Google Spark, which I did start yesterday, but a couple of minutes here and there can make a world of difference in terms of your knowledge. So two honest caveats, because the channel doesn't oversell. The goal is not to kind of overhype here. Spark is US based and English only, rolling out in waves, so you might not have it yet, even if you are US based. And the second is Google has said Spark will eventually be able to spend money on your behalf. That is a later this summer promise. So really interesting about understanding this. This is vital as well for your comprehension of being an orchestrator. AI is going to be spending money very soon. I actually saw John Collison from Stripe. I was watching one of his podcasts. It was actually about him and the CEO of DoorDash. And they were talking about, the evolution of the restaurant industry. And there was an ad in between it. And John Collison was talking about Stripe. I can't recall exactly, but Stripe spend, for want of a better word, and talking about how, you could even set up your OpenClaw with the ability to spend. So for most folks, OpenClaw sounds a little bit exotic. How can I learn about that? It's maybe too much of a stretch for me mentally. I've got a million things to do. I've got, kids running around, or I've got a date tonight, or I've got whatever, going CrossFit, life is being busy. You get me. You just don't feel like you have like multiple hours to sit down and learn about OpenClaw, but that's not important. Google are now offering these services for laymen, shall we say, or laywomen, you know what I mean, the term. Ultimately, people who don't have that coding expertise. So really vital. What this means, if you want to stay relevant at work, or you want to stay relevant with your company, the agentic shift from one story to basically just a consumer app has happened. So set up one recurring task, like summarize my inbox every morning and flag what I need to reply to, and just try it for a week. Just stick with it for a week. The point isn't the gadget. The point is that you're building your AI literacy. And that's the big point here. I'm going to continue to drum that because it's such a simple but profound message. Like, this is literacy. This is not, an opportunity that we can dismiss. We have to build up our AI literacy overall. So this opportunity isn't about being agentic. It's about just becoming the person who can ultimately understand these simple tools. All right, keep moving forward. The money signal, where the cash and the jobs are going. So two numbers. First, the capital. Bloomberg reported that Anthropic, the company behind Claude, raised around $65 billion at a valuation of over $965 billion. For the first time, that puts it above OpenAI's private valuation. The two-horse race, everyone assumed, has, at least on paper, swapped its lead horse. And that's not just Anthropic. capital is pouring into AI infrastructure right now overall, whether it's custom chips, new data centers. It's hard to basically kind of even wrap your head around it. So, but the money can be hype. The second number, and it's the one that really proves to be true, is, as I mentioned before, a couple of weeks ago, Bristol Myers Squibb, a 160-year-old pharmaceutical giant. So think of it, very legacy-based, traditional. Obviously, they're in pharmaceuticals, the science side of things, but often these pharmaceutical companies kind of operate strangely traditionally in ways. So basically what they did was they put Claude into the hands of 30,000 employees. So not as a chatbot, not as or basically not as like a random tool, but as agents wired into how they actually do research, how they do manufacturing, and how they do admin. So when a company that old and cautious moves that fast, it's time to seriously take note. So the tools are getting cheaper. So funding this aggressive kind of approach means that these companies are fighting for your subscription, not just milking it. So that 60% price cut, for example, that I mentioned from Google, you can expect a lot more of that. So the big thing is, don't become married with one tool. When the leaderboard flips to fast kind of like best AI for your task every few months, changes from Microsoft, changes from Google, or let's say, for example, changes from ChatGPT for most folks over to Claude. Microsoft obviously making a big push, and then Google obviously staying relevant as well, undoubtedly, from terms of Google Omni in the last week or so, Google Spark. So before the action tips, one kind of honest reality check, because it tells you exactly what to aim for. So earlier this year, researchers at the University of Montreal, actual pioneers of modern AI, ran the largest study of its kind. They pitted today's open AI models against more than 100,000 people on standardized tests of original thinking. The results made headlines on those idea generation tasks. AI now beats the average human. However, the interesting thing within this is that it was proven that creativity, ultimately core creativity, was better from humans. But again, you can only do the creative approach now moving into the years ahead if you know how to orchestrate these tools, if you have your AI literacy high. So make sure that you're dabbling into Grok, you're dabbling into Google Spark, for example. Do Google Spark after this. Do nothing else. Spend 5 minutes on it. All right. So news is useless, as I say, without a move. So here's the kind of homework. So split two ways. If you want a side income, don't try to build the next AI app. Basically, boring beats clever. Like I said in the example earlier, if you're thinking about selling agentic services, think about, for example, companies like, funeral homes, or companies that are extremely traditional, but also frankly have a huge amount of administrative burden in the background, and think about how you can go and figure out one simple task that you want to improve for them, pitch the service, but don't sell the agentic tool. Don't overwhelm someone who's in a whole different universe in terms of their industry mentally. Sell them the time saving, sell them the fact that, you can cut that additional part-time administrative team member that you don't particularly like, who's scrolling around the back of the office. You can cut that down to only a couple of hours a week, or even eliminate entirely by the usage of this. So that's kind of the big thing. That's the sharp play. So think of these companies like Bristol Myers Squibb and the big push that they're putting at the moment into this space. Don't get left behind. Make sure you're taking that little bit of approach every day. But one kind of final thing I wanted to round out with was, if you're employed, and that can be in two frames. That can be, one is if you are in a business, or if you have your own business. Like, knowing how to orchestrate AI is the thing. That's the go-to. So it's so vital that we all stay abreast of these things to ultimately know to have the literacy and to have the language around describing what you're doing, because we're redacted, we're reduced, we're restricted if we can't actually have the language to describe what we're trying to achieve with these AI tools. We're living in an era where there's tools that are just abundantly blossoming and blooming every single day. And if you're up against someone who has the lexicon, has the vocabulary to actually describe those things, then if you don't have that, you're at a deficit. But make sure that you become the go-to, whether it's in your own business and you're referring this and sharing it with your team, or whether you're in a business and you want to become known as the go-to. I can guarantee you, if there's cuts in your company over the next 12 months and you're the go-to person for AI, I can assure you who will not be getting cut. So keep that top of mind. The same applies for if you have a small business. If you guys are the company in your space that is adopting AI drastically faster than anybody else, again, it's extremely unlikely that you guys will be eaten up. And then finally, if you're going to pitch services externally, you want to sell some sort of service into SMBs, then obviously agentic AI is the way to go. And you don't even have to necessarily build it yourself. You could even find someone else who's doing it and white label it. But point is, spend 5 minutes a day, make sure you take that action, and keep moving forward by one little percentage point every single day.